Okay, let's continue working with strings. So the first thing I thought I'd show you is how to do multi-line strings. Now, unfortunately, this is one of those things that Scrimba is not going to support, or rather maybe it's the Python plugin that doesn't support it. But what you do to get a multi-line string is something along these lines. You use triple quotes to start the string, and then you just use return to break the lines, and then you use triple quotes at the end. And if I now execute this, it's actually just going to print on one line, which is not at all what we want, but it's what we get in this version of Scrimba. So you'll just have to trust me on this and maybe go to repl.it or some other place and try it in a real Python environment, and then you'll see what it looks like. So let's go back to where we were. There. As our next step, we're going to try some find and replace. So we'll start with find. We'll go in here and we'll say print find. So now we're looking for the H character. So we find it the first H at position 14, which is the 15th position. So that's one way we can then later reference it. Or if we look for instance, Python, it starts at position 11. Okay. So the other thing we can do is actually replace. So let's go in back here, change the find to replace. And now we'll replace Python with the syntax. Now it takes two parameters. The first one is what we're looking for. The second one is what we want to replace it with. So we'll replace it with Java. We'll run that. So we now have a string that says, welcome to Java 101. Or we could say C. So that's how you use replace. Now, one thing to remember about this is that strings are what are called immutable. So that means that you can't change them when you've created them. So you need to save them into a new instance. So if I want to save this result, I can't save it in the existing message one. I can create a new one, or I can just set it to a new variable. So I could do this, message1 equals message replace Python with C. Then print message1. So if I run this, we now get the same result. We need to save it into a new variable. We could have also saved it into the same variable like this. That would also work. The next thing we're going to try out is something called membership. So let's look at the following. So now we're going to print and we'll say Python in message. Now what this is going to do is check if Python exists in message. Let's try that. It prints true, so it does exist in there. If we want to check if it doesn't exist, then we can say not in message, and we'll print false. And lastly, we'll cover something called string formatting. So previously, you remember we concatenated strings. Now I'm going to paste in an example here. So we have a variable that has the value Terry. We have a color, red, and then we've concatenated a string. And then we'll run a print statement as well. So we'll run print message. So what does this give us? It says Terry loves color red. Now when we get longer strings that we concatenate, it can get very messy to keep track of what's where. So there's a function in Python that allows us to format strings in a nicer format and make it easier for us to read and not make as many mistakes. So I'll show you that. So we can achieve the same result with a different formatting that looks like this. So we'll create a different one called message1, and it starts with an F. And then we start a string. In this case, we start with the square brackets, and then what we do is we take our variables and insert them in curly brackets. And this makes it a lot easier to read, and we don't have the plus signs and the extra quotation marks floating around the string. So here we have name, loves the color, and then new curly brackets, color, lower, because we have those in capital letters, or maybe we don't, but we don't know. So we want these to be in lower. And let's make the same change up here. There we go. And then we'll run another print statement, print message1. As you see, this gives us exactly the same result. And now we just have the Terry bit to change. So we've got name here. And what do we want to change that to? So here's your first assignment on this. Make the name Terry capitalized. So did you try that out? So how do you do that? Well, here's one way. Run it. And there we go. So those are some further things you can do with strings. I'll talk to you later.